Chantal Mauduit was often called the Black Widow of the climbing world. Known for her striking looks, men would go to great lengths, even risking their lives to be near her. Some described her as a master manipulator, using her charm to conquer the world's tallest mountains. Her reputation was full of controversy. But let's start from the beginning. Chantal was born in France, near the Alps, and got into winter sports from a young age. She first enjoyed alpine skiing, but soon switched to mountaineering. After earning her mountain guide certification, she started tackling some of the toughest routes in France. At 22, Chantal took third place in an ice climbing competition with 25 of Europe's best climbers. She was the only woman. Her remarkable skills drew attention. Chantal joined the French National Mountaineering Association, and her first climb above 5,000 meters was in the Andes, where she summited three 6,000-meter peaks. One of the climbers was so impressed that they invited her on an Everest expedition in 1991, a dream for any climber. Chantal once wrote in her diary that climbing was like cycling uphill without an engine. She didn't reach the summit on that trip, but from then on, she decided to focus only on climbing 8,000-meter peaks, setting a bold goal. She wanted to do this alpine style, without oxygen and with minimal gear. Chantal was known for her ability to acclimatize quickly, handling high altitudes better than many male climbers. The French climber was popular at base camps, but was also accused of using her charm to manipulate men. Some said she enjoyed the competition for her attention and often stirred things up. During her second attempt to climb Everest in 1991, her presence even sparked a fight between climbers. Despite the drama, Chantal's focus shifted to American climber Thor Kieser, who fell in love with her. They started dating and planned to climb Mount Fitzroy in Argentina together, though they needed money for the expedition, as climbing is not cheap. Chantal led tourists on different routes several times to save money for this trip, but just before the expedition, she told Thor she didn't have enough for the ticket. Wanting to be with her, Thor took on extra jobs to cover the cost. They traveled to Argentina together, but during the climb, their relationship started to break down. They couldn't reach the summit, and their relationship also struggled. Journalist Jennifer Jordan wrote that before another attempt, Chantal gave Thor an ultimatum. If they reached the summit that day, their relationship would be fine. Thor didn't understand how this would change things, but took it seriously. He led most of the way, fixing Chantal's small mistakes, determined to succeed. By 11 p.m., Thor was struggling through a tough section not far from the summit. Exhausted and drenched, he kept pushing forward. Late that night, he grabbed a ledge and shifted his weight, but the rock beneath him started to move. Before he could react, he was pulled off the wall and fell. As he tumbled down, the thought crossed his mind, "At least I'm still alive." After falling about 20 meters, bouncing off rocks, he landed on a wide ledge. Alive, but hurt. His eyelid was torn, and his right arm was broken in multiple places. Nearby climbers rushed to help and lowered him to base camp. Thor's attempt to reach the summit was over, but Chantal wasn't ready to give up. She told Thor Kieser she would try again the next morning with a different team. Her parting words to him were, "I no longer love you." Thor went home heartbroken and even started seeing a psychologist who warned him to avoid her in the future, but he didn't listen. When he found out that Chantal was preparing to climb K2, Thor joined a Russian-American expedition. This team included some of the strongest climbers, like Americans Ed Viesturs and Scott Fischer, along with Vladimir Baliberdin, the first Soviet climber to summit Everest. Chantal was part of a Swiss climbing team, heading to a route in Pakistan, a Muslim country with strict rules. Despite this, Chantal didn't feel the need to follow the local customs. Other climbers mentioned that she ignored the traditions, walked alone in public, and wore short shorts, which put her in risky situations a few times. After 19 days, she reached the K2 base camp, ready for the climb. The team chose to do it in alpine style again, which means they wouldn't help other climbers by setting up ropes, saving their energy instead. However, Other climbers noticed that the Swiss team used the ropes set up by others, making their climb easier. Chantal, who didn't like carrying heavy backpacks, let the men on the team carry all her gear. She enjoyed the attention and help. Her own backpack was small and light, but that wasn't her only tactic. At the time, many thought the Swiss team wasn't ready for a summit attempt. When Chantal realized this, she broke Pakistani law by secretly joining the Soviet-American team. She was supposed to leave with her original team, but chose to stay instead. Chantal accepted an invitation from her ex-boyfriend Thor Kieser. While Thor did the hard work of setting up ropes, carrying gear, and preparing the base camp, Chantal started a relationship with his climbing partner, Ed Viesturs. On July 28th, Kieser, Viesturs, and Neil Beitelman left base camp to climb K2. By July 30th, they reached Camp 3, while other climbers, Vladimir Baliberdin and Gennady Kopejka, were 300 meters ahead. Viesturs and Beitelman shared a tent, while Thor slept in another. During the night, Thor heard footsteps. It was Chantal. After waiting for the men to leave base camp, Chantal quietly prepared and followed them, joining the team higher up. As they climbed, Viesturs and Beitelman became worried about the weather and decided to descend while the others pushed ahead. On July 31st, the weather was clear. Thor was carrying a heavy load, including a tent, stove, sleeping bag, food, and ropes. Eventually, they had to leave some of the gear behind, like their sleeping bags, rope, and most of the food, which made it easier to move. However, when night fell, they had to stop. Thor got frostbite on his feet, while Chantal, wearing a thin jumpsuit, didn't seem bothered by the cold and handled the altitude well. After a freezing night, Thor decided to go back and get the gear, including his sleeping bag. Chantal asked him to bring hers too, and she stayed behind. Thor, following her request, met climber Alex Nicky on the way down, who helped him. They didn't make it to Camp 4 and spent the night on the slopes of K2. The climb resumed the next morning. On August 2nd, the group reached Camp 4, where they met Baliberdin and Kopejka, who were coming down after becoming the first to summit via the Abruzzi Spur since 1986. After spending the night at 8,600 meters, they were almost completely worn out. They left a tent and sleeping bag for Alexei Nikiforov and hurried down. Then, it was time for the summit attempt. Thor Kieser woke up before sunrise and started making a path through half a meter of snow, with Alexei following. But just 200 meters from the top, Thor realized he was too weak to continue and make it back down safely. He had used up all his energy clearing the trail. Jennifer Jordan describes the situation. Thor sat there, looking for Chantal and Alexei below so he could hand over the task of leading the way. They were still far off. Thor tried to cry, but his body wouldn't respond. Suddenly, a strong, clear voice filled his mind saying, "If you want to survive, go down." Thor glanced around, but no one was there. He got up and began heading down. Chantal was the last one to leave camp. Following the trail, she soon caught up to Alexei at the bottleneck, passed him, and met Thor on his way down. "Thor, come with me, we can reach the summit together," she said. The offer was tempting, but Thor stuck to his decision. He was too exhausted to continue. "Whatever happens, know that you're a good person," Chantal told him. He replied that he would wait for her at Camp 4. His decision to retreat ended up saving not only his life, but also Chantal's and Alexei's. As he started his descent, Thor Kieser found 50 meters of rope that Alexei had discarded, thinking he wouldn't need it anymore. Thor paused, secured the rope to the ice, and set up handrails at the most dangerous part of the bottleneck, allowing Chantal and Alexei to descend safely. Meanwhile, Chantal, who hadn't exerted much energy carrying gear to base camps, setting up ropes, or breaking trails through deep snow, used her small backpack and incredible ability to adjust to the altitude. On August 3rd, 1992, at 5 p.m., she became the fourth woman to reach the summit of K2, a huge accomplishment in her climbing career. K2, also known as the Savage Mountain, is one of the hardest peaks to climb technically. However, her excitement didn't last long. During the climb, she lost her sunglasses, leaving her eyes unprotected from the cold, the tiny ice particles in the air, and especially the sun's ultraviolet rays, which can burn the eyes in minutes at that height. By the time she reached the summit, Chantal had gone blind and couldn't get down on her own. She crawled into a snow cave, which had been dug 2 days earlier by Balaberdin, and started to freeze. Unable to see, she couldn't descend by herself. Spending another cold night at such a high altitude would be deadly. But then something unexpected happened. Alexei, who was descending after her, found her in the cave. He managed to get her up, and they began descending together. Chantal, blind and suffering from frostbite on her hands and feet, kept dozing off as she walked. Alexei had to keep waking her. Eventually, Thor's rope setup helped them. Alexei clipped into the rope, but when he shifted his weight, one of his crampons came loose, causing him to lose balance and fall several meters before the rope caught him. When Alexei got to the tent, he was on the verge of death from altitude sickness, exhaustion, and cold. He collapsed into Thor's tent. "Where's Chantal?" Thor asked. "She was behind me," Alexei replied. About 45 minutes later, Thor heard crunching snow and unsteady footsteps. Chantal, with her hands out in front like a child, was trying to find her way down. She couldn't see anything and was in a dazed state, but kept descending. Thor pulled her into the tent, took off her boots, and saw that her feet were badly frostbitten but could still be warmed. He quickly made tea, soup, and gave them chocolate. After spending 3 days at Camp 4, above the dangerous death zone at 8,000 meters, Thor realized he was running out of time. At such high altitudes, even resting doesn't help you recover. No matter how strong you are slowly dying. Now, he had to not only get himself down, but also help 2 almost lifeless climbers. The next afternoon, the 3 climbers started their descent. Alexei and Thor supported Chantal under her arms as she could barely move her legs. They would carry her a few meters, then sit down to rest, repeating this process endlessly. In 3 hours, they covered only about 60 meters. Thor was concerned that leading Chantal down the difficult slope at night could be deadly. So, he decided to set up a tent. Chantal sat still in the snow. Alexei, focusing on his own survival, chose to keep descending, leaving Chantal's rescue to Thor. Thor and Chantal prepared for another night at over 8,000 meters. The next day, the weather was good. Thor contacted Viesturs and Fischer at Camp 3 via radio. They informed him that Alexei had reached them the night before and was ready to come up and help bring Chantal down. As they climbed, Viesturs and Fischer noticed a spot that could trigger an avalanche, so they secured themselves with a rope for safety. Not far from their camp, Viesturs felt a strong sense of danger, making the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He quickly started digging a hole, hoping to shelter himself from the avalanche that he felt was coming. Fischer, unsure of what was happening, watched him. Suddenly, a massive wave of ice and snow hit Fischer, sending him tumbling down the slope from a high point. Viesturs heard the snow cracking and looked out just in time to see Fischer being swept away. He jumped into the hole he had dug as the avalanche rushed over him. However, his safety was short-lived. The rope they were tied to tightened, yanking him out of the hole like a fish caught on a line and dragging him hundreds of meters down the slope. In a panic, he used his ice axe to try to stop himself, and eventually he managed to grab onto a rock. They hung there, just a few meters from the edge of a cliff. Thankfully, neither was hurt, and they continued their climb to rescue Chantal. Thor carefully lowered Chantal down the rope, taking his time. After a few hours, he met Viesturs and Fischer, but Chantal was completely worn out by then. Viesturs quickly opened his backpack and knelt in front of Chantal, saying he had eye drops. He gently lifted her glasses to see her swollen red eyes. Together, they continued the descent to Camp 3. It took them 2 more days to reach Camp 1. By the end of the descent, Chantal felt well enough to go down on her own. Viesturs, always cautious, remembered that climbing K2 was the only time he broke his rule of always being safe. In her memories of the K2 climb, Chantal barely talks about how tired she was. She only mentions that her eyes hurt and leaves it at that. Instead, she vividly recalls how warmly she was welcomed at base camp, almost like a hero. Chantal wrote, "Charlie brought me tea and cookies, and I fell into his arms. The Mexicans congratulated me, and I felt overwhelmed by the warmth of human connections." However, she didn't mention climber Thor Kaiser at all in her memoirs. After her return, she faced a significant fine for climbing without permission, which she simply tore up before leaving Pakistan. Interestingly, climber Gennady Kopejka, in his tribute to Alexei, who later died on Everest, also minimized Thor Kaiser's contribution to Chantal's rescue. He referred to Thor only as an unnamed American who turned back before reaching the summit. Kopejka credited Alexei Nikiforov as the main person who helped Chantal until other climbers arrived. Alexei stated that Chantal didn't actually reach the summit because she misjudged her strength, but she was still recognized for the ascent. After the death of Polish climber Wanda Rutkiewicz, Chantal was the only woman who returned alive from the K2 summit. When Chantal returned to France, she was celebrated as a national hero, but her relationship with Thor had ended. In the climbing world, she became a controversial figure. Some accused her of using men for her climbing ambitions, showing little regard for their safety. This led to her being called the Black Widow. However, climber Daniel Mazur had a different view. He said, "Chantal was the opposite of the climbing scene focused on big sponsors and lots of Sherpa help. She just loved the mountains. Those who criticized her behind her back were often interested in her romantically. While she did use her looks to gain influence, she had the spirit of a winner. She wasn't always cheerful. She dealt with a painful knee and wasn't always in top shape, but she was very strong. Sometimes she pushed herself too hard." Chantal's questionable success on K2 helped her secure sponsorship, allowing her to return to Everest in the spring of 1993 with a New Zealand team. Despite having 9 climbers and 8 Sherpas in her group, she insisted on climbing alone and faster than the others, which annoyed some of the men around her. She reached an altitude of 8,400 meters, but was moving too slowly and not dressed warmly enough for the cold, so she decided to turn back to avoid serious frostbite. Later that year, she returned to Everest with a Spanish team, but only managed to climb to 8,000 meters. Without proper permission, she and fellow climber Pemba Sherpa attempted to climb Shishapangma and Cho Oyu illegally. They successfully summited both mountains in October. Upon returning to Kathmandu, Chantal was fined for her illegal climbs, but she left for France without paying, complaining about the bureaucracy in the Himalayas. Chantal then traveled to Mount William in Antarctica, where a film was made about her. Afterward, she returned to Everest to try climbing the previously unclimbed Northeast Ridge. By this time, she had gained popularity and joined Russell Bryce's expedition as a paying client. However, avalanches made the route too dangerous, and Chantal and the other climbers were exhausted, so they had to turn back. In 1995, Chantal attempted Everest again with Rob Hall's expedition on the Southeast Ridge. She made it to the South Summit at 8,750 meters, but then had to turn back. She was the slowest climber in the group. When she stopped at the South Summit, Rob put his hand on her shoulder and insisted she descend. Chantal, with blue lips and unfocused eyes, nodded quietly, unable to argue. After descending about 30 meters, she collapsed and lost consciousness, realizing she needed help to get down. Several climbers, including Ed Viesturs, came to her rescue and helped carry her down the mountain. They took her to the tents for first aid, and she quickly recovered. The next day, she was already walking around base camp as if nothing had happened. However, Hall was furious and told everyone he had dragged Chantal down like a sack of potatoes, permanently banning her from his expeditions. Chantal was known as a climber who often needed help and put others at risk. Many referred to her as the Black Widow. Several climbers lost their chance to reach the summit while trying to rescue her, with some even putting their lives on the line. Thor Kaiser remembered, "Chantal didn't care about her safety. I climbed with her because I loved her, not because it was safe." Chantal was like a modern-day Helen of Troy. She stirred mixed feelings among thousands of climbers. In 1994, the French magazine Vertical commented on her, saying, "The issue with Chantal is that her climb seemed too easy for us to take seriously." After British climber Alison Hargreaves tragically died on K2, Chantal remarked, "I admire her, but we're different in one key way. I'm still alive." After trying 6 times without success to reach the summit of Everest, Chantal decided to focus on climbing Lhotse, a mountain that hadn't had a female climber reach its top yet. In 1996, she joined an American team to climb Lhotse. Unfortunately, as they were making their final push to the summit, a hurricane and blizzard hit, forcing everyone except Chantal to turn back. Chantal continued to climb and claimed to be the first woman to reach the summit of Lhotse. However, there's no proof of her achievement. She climbed alone, had no witnesses, and didn't take any summit photos, saying her camera froze and the strong winds forced her to descend quickly. Many climbers question her claim. On that same day, the weather was indeed severe, and Rob Hall and Scott Fisher tragically died on Everest, while Chantal asserted she had summited Lhotse alone. After Lhotse, she climbed Manaslu, and the French press quickly named her the greatest female climber of the modern era. Thor Kaiser remembers that Chantal had a special charm that captivated men. She often joked about having too many men and too little time. Former lovers would approach her with a hungry look, and she would respond by looking them in the eye and saying, "Oh, sorry, I don't remember. Have we met?" In a strange turn of events, we reach the end of the story. In 1998, while climbing Dhaulagiri, Chantal was with her friend Ang Chering Sherpa, who was more of a companion than a hired guide. They set up their tent at Camp 2, close to an Italian team's tent. Franco Brunello warned Chantal about a crevasse further up the route. She thanked him and then went into the tent with the Sherpa. That was the last time they were seen alive. The Italian team chose to descend and wait for the snowstorm to pass. Before leaving, they noticed Chantal's tent was partly buried in snow, but didn't go over to check. When the storm ended, they returned to find the tent completely covered in snow. Worried, they started digging and discovered Chantal and the Sherpa dead in their sleeping bags. Chantal had a deformed jaw and a broken neck, while the Sherpa appeared to have suffocated. Many found Chantal's death puzzling. She didn't die while climbing. Instead, it happened in her tent at base camp. There are theories that an ice block might have fallen on her, but no one saw what truly occurred, leaving the real story a mystery. After her passing, Chantal's body was sent to France for cremation. She had made detailed plans for her burial, including specific wishes. For instance, after the service, a recording of her laughter, made just for that moment, was played. Her will hasn't been fully carried out yet because she wanted her ashes scattered in many places, and her family hasn't visited them all. This mysterious ending adds to the complexity of Chantal's already debated legacy. The uncertainty surrounding her death and her unique final requests highlight the complicated and often conflicting nature of a climber who both inspired and challenged the mountaineering world.